The morning light slipped through the blinds of Harper's diner, casting golden stripes across the worn tables and freshly brewed coffee pots. The air was thick with the scent of pancakes and roasted beans, but inside that warmth, a young woman moved quietly, almost invisible to everyone. Her name was Lena, a shy waitress who had worked there for 2 years, taking every shift she could find, not because she loved the work, but because silence was the only thing that didn't frighten her. She spoke very little. When customers tried to chat, she smiled politely and nodded, her hands shaking slightly as she poured their coffee. People said she was timid, maybe too timid for her own good, but no one knew the truth. Lena had grown up in silence. Her mother had been deaf, and Lena had learned sign language before she even learned to speak. When her mother passed away 2 years ago, that silence became her only friend. Every day, she tucked her long brown hair behind her ears, tied her apron tight, and told herself, just make it through today. That day, though, would not be like any other. It began with the sound of expensive shoes clicking against the diner floor, a sound that didn't belong in a place like Harper's. Heads turned. Even the fry cook, Mark, stopped flipping eggs. Through the door walked a man in a tailored gray suit, black tie, sharp eyes, the kind of man who carried power like perfume. Behind him walked an older woman, graceful but gentle-looking, with a kind face framed by silver hair. She wore a simple cardigan and carried a small notepad in her hands. The man scanned the diner like he owned the place. The woman beside him smiled softly at everyone, then sat down in the corner booth by the window. Lena, clutching her notepad, hesitated before walking over. "Good morning," she said, her voice soft, almost afraid to be heard. "Can I get you?" Before she could finish, the man raised his hand. "She can't hear you," he said flatly, not even looking up from his phone. "Just take her order and make it quick. She doesn't like waiting." Lena blinked, confused. She turned to the older woman, who looked up and smiled. Her eyes were warm, the kind that reminded Lena of her mother's eyes. Then the woman lifted her hands and began to sign. "Good morning. I'd like coffee, please. And maybe some toast." Lena froze. No one had ever signed to her since her mother died. For a heartbeat, she forgot she was at work, her hands moved instinctively, signing back. "Of course. Would you like butter or jam with your toast?" The woman's eyes widened in surprise, then lit up like sunlight breaking through clouds. She reached forward and gently squeezed Lena's hand, her smile saying more than words ever could. The man, her son, looked up from his phone for the first time, frowning. "Wait," he said, watching their hands move. "You know sign language?" Lena nodded shyly. "My mother was deaf," she said softly. "I grew up signing." He blinked, momentarily speechless. "Huh. Not something you see every day." He leaned back, studying her, not with kindness, but with that calculating look wealthy men had when they saw something they couldn't categorize. He was Ethan Cross, the heir to the Cross Corporation, one of the most powerful business families in the city. The woman beside him was Evelyn Cross, his mother, once a famous pianist, now living in a world of silence. Lena didn't know who they were. She didn't care. She only saw a lonely woman who missed being understood. As she walked away to get their order, Ethan whispered something under his breath, but his mother caught his hand, shaking her head with a small smile. She signed something to him, but he looked away. He didn't sign back. Minutes passed. Lena returned with their coffee and toast, placing them gently on the table. Evelyn thanked her in signs again, and the two began a quiet, wordless conversation that no one else in the diner understood. Ethan watched, and something in his chest tightened. He hadn't seen his mother smile like that in years. Not since his father died. Not since she'd stopped playing the piano. He stared at Lena, this shy girl with tired eyes and trembling hands, and wondered how she'd done it, how she'd reached a part of his mother he couldn't. When they finished, Evelyn insisted on paying herself, digging through her purse. Lena tried to stop her, signing, "It's okay. I can take it up front for you." Evelyn smiled, nodding gratefully. As she stood, she scribbled something on a napkin and handed it to Lena before leaving. Ethan followed silently, looking back once. Their eyes met briefly, and Lena felt an unfamiliar warmth in her chest. When she unfolded the napkin later, her hands trembled. Written in delicate handwriting were 5 words. "Thank you for seeing me." That night, Lena sat by her small window apartment, staring at those words. She didn't know that tomorrow, her life would change forever, that one act of kindness would lead her to a world of wealth, judgment, and love she never imagined. The next morning, Lena arrived at work like usual. But as she was tying her apron, a black limousine pulled up in front of the diner. Everyone inside stopped and stared. Out stepped Ethan, sharp as ever, his expression unreadable. He walked straight in, ignoring the whispers around him. "Lena," he said firmly, his voice echoing through the quiet room. "You're coming with me." The whole diner froze. Lena dropped her tray. I'm sorry. My mother insists," he replied. "She hasn't stopped talking, signing, about you since yesterday. She wants you to come work for her. As her personal companion." Lena's eyes widened. "Work, for her?" Ethan nodded. "She says you're the only one who listens." Mark, the cook, whistled. "Girl, you better go before he changes his mind." Lena hesitated. "But I can't just leave. I have shifts." Ethan cut her off. "We'll handle the." The following weeks passed like a gentle melody. Every morning, Lena helped Evelyn in the garden, sitting together among roses and sunlight, their hands dancing in graceful movements of sign language. Lena read books aloud, her voice soft and calm even though Evelyn could not hear her, but she watched Lena's lips, smiling every time she spoke. There was a peace between them, a quiet connection that didn't need words. Ethan, however, was a different story. He spent most of his time behind closed doors, locked in conference calls, sealed away by meetings and numbers. To him, the world was a battlefield of business, no time for softness or emotion. But each time he came home, he noticed something strange: his mother looked alive again. He would find her painting, gardening, or even laughing silently with Lena. One evening, he stood by the hallway, watching through the open doors of the living room as Lena and Evelyn communicated through signs and smiles. Evelyn was showing Lena old photos, pictures of her as a young pianist, standing beside a grand piano on the stage of a golden concert hall. Lena watched with wonder, signing. "You played piano?" Evelyn's face glowed with pride and nostalgia. "For 40 years. I stopped when I lost my hearing. Music left me, and I didn't know how to live without it." Lena's eyes softened. "Maybe music never left you. Maybe it's still inside, you just can't hear it." Evelyn touched her hand, eyes glistening. "You speak like someone who's lost something too." Lena looked down, blinking tears away. "I lost my mother. She was deaf. People used to call her broken. But she taught me that silence isn't emptiness, it's another way of listening." Evelyn smiled, a trembling smile that reached her soul. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He kept hearing Lena's words in his mind. He had always been embarrassed that his mother was deaf. He had avoided learning sign language, afraid it made her, and him, look weak. But now, watching Lena, he realized something: she didn't treat Evelyn like a burden. She treated her like a person. For the first time, he wondered if he was the one who'd been deaf all along. The next morning, Evelyn asked Lena to join her in the music room. The room hadn't been opened in years. Dust covered the keys of the grand piano, the once bright ivory now faded. Lena looked around, awestruck. "It's beautiful," she signed. Evelyn nodded, tears forming. I haven't touched it since I lost my hearing. But I feel it calling me again. Lena hesitated, then said softly, "May I?" She sat on the bench and gently pressed a single key. The note floated through the air, warm, delicate, full of life. Evelyn closed her eyes, placing her hand on the wooden frame, feeling the vibration through her fingertips. Her lips trembled. Lena began to play. Slowly at first, uncertain, then more confident, an old lullaby her mother used to hum before bed. The melody was simple, but in that room, it felt like a prayer. Evelyn's fingers followed the vibrations, tracing invisible music in the air. When Lena finished, Evelyn was crying silently. She signed through tears. I could feel every note. Lena took her hands, signing back. Then you never lost music. It just changed the way it reaches you. That moment changed everything. Evelyn began playing again, not with her ears, but with her soul. Every day, she and Lena would sit together, feeling the rhythm through touch, through memory, through love. Sometimes Ethan would stand at the door, watching in awe. But soon, that joy would be tested by something none of them saw coming. One morning, Lena arrived in the garden to find Evelyn sitting still on the bench, pale and weak. "Mrs. Cross," she whispered, rushing to her side. Evelyn tried to smile, but her hands trembled. She signed weakly. "I'm fine, dear. Just tired." But Lena could see it wasn't fine. She called for Ethan immediately. He arrived within minutes, eyes wide with worry. The doctors came, the mansion filled with whispers and fear. Finally, the truth came out, Evelyn's heart was failing. The doctor's words were clear. She doesn't have much time left. Keep her comfortable. Ethan's world fell apart. For the first time, the man who had everything realized he was helpless. He sat by his mother's bedside, silent, unable to even tell her how much he loved her, because he had never learned her language. He turned to Lena, voice cracking. "Can you tell her for me? Tell her I'm sorry. For everything." Lena took a deep breath, her hands trembling as she began to sign. "Your son says he's sorry. He wishes he had listened more. He loves you very much." Evelyn smiled weakly, turning to her son. She reached for his hand, her eyes soft. Slowly, painfully, she lifted her trembling fingers, and signed something herself. Lena's throat tightened. She turned to Ethan, her voice breaking. She said, "She always knew. And she forgave you long ago." Ethan broke. He dropped his head beside her hand, tears spilling silently. For once, the powerful billionaire was just a boy who wished he'd learned to say "I love you" in her language before it was too late. That night, Lena stayed by Evelyn's side. She played the piano softly, the same lullaby as before, while Evelyn rested, her hand resting lightly on the wood, feeling each note vibrate through her. A faint smile lingered on her lips. When morning came, the mansion was silent again. Evelyn was gone. The days that followed were filled with grief. The funeral was quiet, elegant, filled with people who barely knew the real Evelyn Cross. They spoke of her beauty, her fame, her music, but only Lena and Ethan understood the depth of her silence. After everyone left, Lena stood alone by the piano, her tears dripping on the keys. "I'll miss you," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Thank you for showing me what real kindness sounds like." Ethan stood behind her. His eyes were. Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was a delicate necklace, a silver charm shaped like a music note, carved with the initials EC. "It was my mother's," he said softly. "She wanted you to have it." Lena held it close to her chest, tears welling. "She'll always be with us," she whispered. He nodded. "In every note. In every silence." Then, for the first time, Ethan did something no one expected. He sat at the piano beside her. Together, they played the same melody Lena had once played for his mother. The sound filled the mansion, echoing through the halls, carrying the memory of Evelyn Cross, the deaf pianist who had taught them that love isn't something you hear. It's something you feel. When the last note faded, Ethan turned to Lena, his hands trembling as he signed. "I love you." Lena smiled through her tears, her fingers answering back. "I love you too." And in that moment, silence spoke louder than any sound in the world. As the camera pans out, from the glowing piano, from their joined hands, the narrator's voice would softly say, "Sometimes, the quietest people say the loudest things. Sometimes, love doesn't need to be heard, only felt." If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who believes in the power of kindness and connection. Because even in silence, love always finds a way.